Congratulations on making it to the second session. Before we get into the actual 33 steps, let me talk to you a bit about the overall concept of the infinite being within. As I said before, I was very influenced by the Tao Te Ching. And what I liked about the Tao was its purity, its simplicity, and the fact that it's not a religion. It doesn't have rules, regulations, and hierarchies. The Tao Te Ching was written about 500 BC, in theory by a person called Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu means old man, so nobody actually knows who the author of the Tao Te Ching was. It has been postulated that the Tao Te Ching is a mixture of several different writers' work, because you can see different styles and different ideas in the text. However, as I said, it's very, very short. I'd like to read you the first few lines of the Tao and then explain them to you. I'm going to use Arthur Waley's translation because it is really the definitive translation. The Tao Te Ching, verse 1. The way that we have been told of is not the unvarying way. The names that can be named are not unvarying names. It was from the nameless that heaven and earth sprang. The named is but the mother that rears the 10,000 creatures, each after its own kind. When I read that, my first reaction was, what the hell is this guy talking about? So I asked my venerated teacher one day, I said to him, Boogaloo, how do you get in touch with this Tao thing? And what he said to me was, you can't really understand the Tao or the infinite self intellectually. It's beyond the mind. It's like a riddle, really. The only way to comprehend it is through heightened awareness and feeling. He said, try this discipline. He suggested that I rise at 4 a.m. in the morning and walk in silence for an hour in the forest. So I began the discipline, rising daily, walking in all weathers. In England, if you know England, well, there's plenty of weather here. And I would walk silently through the forest in the dark, not really having a bloody clue what I was doing. But the funny thing is that having done that discipline daily for 3 years, I eventually got what the Tao was all about. The first line of the Tao says that you cannot put a name to it. And that's a fact. It's a truth. The Tao is the essence of all things that sustain the 10,000 creatures. It is the underlying beauty that comes from the grace of the God force flowing through all things. That grace, that life force, some people call it the etheric, you can actually see it. Get yourself in a relaxed state and stare at the top of a tree, preferably at sunset. After a minute or so, move your gaze to the area of sky to the right of the tree. Stare approximately where 1 o'clock would be on the face of a watch. Now, without moving your eyes from the point in the sky that you're staring at, move your attention back to the top of the tree. Remember, don't move your eyes, just adjust your attention. Doing this, you engage your peripheral vision. You'll see the enormous flame-like spirals of energy firing out from the tree in all directions. If you can't do it first time, leave it and try again later. A good time would be after one of the fasts that I mentioned in one of the later sessions. Once you see the energy, once you know that the God force runs through all things, once you understand it is the unifying power, the raison d'etre of everything that exists, you'll begin to understand the infinite nature of this dimension, of this evolution. And gradually you'll come to understand the Tao and what the infinite self can do for you. But in order to do that, you have to release from the ego's tight, limited perception and accept the infinite power within you. It comes to an understanding that says, when you are prepared to release and detach and let go, you gain everything. It took me a while to make the turn, to adjust from the crazies that I used to hang out with, and to arrive at a more powerful, placid, serene lifestyle. My quest and my path was fraught with disciplines of every kind. So, in order to do that, I had to put into my quest, or my path, disciplines of every kind, in order to control myself. So I took on nutritional discipline, the discipline of walking in the forest, the discipline of attending meditations and meetings, reading, studying, and taking time aside each day for silence. 25,000 people were attracted to my spiritual teacher over the years, and at each level of the teachings, the disciplines got harder and harder. After a period of about 3 years, almost everybody had dropped out, to the point where in the end, there were only 72 people left, one of which was yours truly. Eventually, there were only 3 of us left. It was that tough. The reason why the disciplines were so difficult and the people dropped out was that the teaching called upon you to be extremely disciplined and extremely spontaneous. So my teacher would phone and say, "There's a meeting next Wednesday evening in southern Spain at 7 o'clock. Be there." There wasn't any question of could you make it financially, did you have the time off, could you get to Spain, was it comfortable, are you happy with the idea, is it convenient? It was just a matter of be there. If you didn't want to be a part of the teaching, you didn't have to show up. But if you went and you were even 1 minute late, you were tossed out forever. So you can see how we got rid of people really quickly. There were no ifs, buts, or maybes. There was no slack. And what I learned was that spiritual growth and getting to a higher awareness is not necessarily convenient. That's why most people never make it. They want to perceive a higher place, but they want to do it from the considerations of the ego and all of the limitations of an ego-based consciousness that often has the energy of a slug in a puddle. It's not doable that way. What Lao Tzu was talking about in the first few lines of the Tao Te Ching was that the world of the infinite self, the world of the Christ consciousness, the God force, the Buddhahood, runs through all things. It is everywhere, but it has no definition. It is only the ego that defines, discriminates, quantifies, measures, and creates an edge or framework so that it can understand things. But the eternity, the life force, the etheric, the grace of God, let's say, that is flowing through a plant, a tree, an animal, your human body, the water that flows through the streams, doesn't have a definition. You can define a tree because there is a precise and definite space around the tree where it is not. Here the tree is, and here's the space around it, where it isn't. But the God force is omnipresent, meaning it is everywhere. So it can't be defined. And of course the God force, if it is present, must also be God, because God is everywhere. The God force and God must logically be one and the same. You can work it out. There's a law in physics that states that no 2 particles can occupy the same space. So if the God force is everywhere, and God, he, she, or it, is everywhere, then God and the God force must be one and the same. Because you couldn't have a particle of God existing in the same place as a particle of God force, because no 2 particles can be in the same place. So either you have to have a particle of God force and a particle of God side by side, and then both of them would not be omnipresent, because there would be places where they were not everywhere, or they would have to be superimposed upon each other, which is not possible. So the God force and God are one and the same. So to reach the infinity within you, you have to first change your mind about definitions. What the Tao says is, it is because of definitions that we limit ourselves. So the Tao says, nothing is high or low. Nothing is intrinsically short or long. No journey is short or long. One could say, well, this journey is a long journey because it takes you 4 hours to drive from A to B. But it's not long compared to, say, sending a satellite to Mars. And that isn't long compared to sending a satellite to the outer limits of the Milky Way. So the first understanding or the first perception that we have to think about is that the infinite being has no definition. That can be a little unnerving for the ego, because the ego likes the idea of my body, my people, my house, my car, I am here, I'm not everywhere else. But in fact, what we're looking to do is to expand our heart to where we can understand that sense of infinity within us, and where we can see ourselves in the perception of being eternal. Meaning that you existed before you came to the earth plane, you exist now in the physical form, and you will exist after you leave the earth plane, or after your body quits in the earth plane. So the idea of infinity is a very beautiful concept. But it's a very hard concept for the ego personality to grip. I can say to you, think about infinity. and perhaps you can vaguely imagine something going on forever. But if I say to you, what does infinity feel like? You'll probably not have a precise feeling inside of you. You may say, oh yes, Stu, I think I know what infinity's like, but thinking you know is only the first rung on the ladder. So what we're looking to do is to first of all get you to accept the idea of the infinite self intellectually. In other words, we're selling the ego personality. Then gradually through discipline, meditation, seeing life in a sacred way, opening yourself up, moving beyond fear, coming to a more compassionate understanding of this planet, you will eventually experience infinity as a feeling. Then you'll be able to say, yep, I feel eternal. I feel immortal. I feel infinite. I am everywhere. The other thing that's very important to grasp early on is that spiritual growth is not necessarily convenient. And it's not necessarily comfortable. Not only because you have to discard an awful lot of beliefs and definitions and the things that you hold sacrosanct at the moment, but also because you have to naturally enter within yourself the reality of who you are. As you begin to look at yourself, that creates a little bit of discomfort. It's difficult to learn to control the ego and discipline the mind without it reacting. The idea that something or someone is going to descend upon you one day and raise you up. You know, a great guru is going to touch you on the forehead. Jesus or some angelic being is suddenly going to lift you to a higher plane. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. And I'm sorry if that contradicts your beliefs, but energy seeks its own level. Even though something or someone can inspire you or show you the way, in the end, the only way you can sustain a higher energy is to create it from within yourself. In the laws of physics, a subatomic particle can for a millisecond borrow energy and move to a faster orbit around the nucleus. However, the particle can't keep that borrowed energy indefinitely. So whatever energy is borrowed in this second, a split second later it has to be paid back, and the particle returns to the energy level it had before. I think your energy and spiritual growth follows the same rules. You can be inspired by a hymn, a fantastic sermon, some great words out of a book, but you can only borrow that inspiration. In the end, raising your energy involves discipline, involves working upon yourself. There's no particular time when you can say, I've done it. It's a perpetual process of unfolding within you, forever and ever. That is the only way that you can sustain yourself indefinitely at a higher level. The very first step of the 33 steps is called I am God. Now you may think, who's this little twerp saying I am God? Here's what I mean. I mean that you have to accept the idea of the God force being within you. Obviously, if the God force is everywhere, it must be within you. But most people either have no concept of God, or they externalize God and create an image of God outside of themselves. So they project away from themselves and they say, this person is God, these ideas are God, my mind is God, money is God, sex is God, whatever. The God force is within, and you have to internalize that God force and accept that it is flowing through you. When God is outside of you, you can't really use it. You have to internalize it for it to become a truly awesome power in your life. Here's another concept that comes from I am God. I believe that the infinite you that dwells inside you had a vision of what it was going to be getting into in this lifetime. I don't believe that you came here by accident, that suddenly you plopped into this little diaper and thought, what the hell am I doing here? I believe that your evolution here on the earth plane is so powerful, so sacred, so dynamic, that the infinity within you had an overview. In the ancient teachings, it was said that the divinity, the higher self as some people call it, could see the first 13 years of life. Not every minute detail, but it could see the family you're going to be born into, your father and mother's strengths and weaknesses, perhaps the absence of your father or mother, the fact that you were raised by your grandparents or in an orphanage. It could see the genetic code and what physical disciplines or traits would develop. It could understand the mindset and the emotion of the tribal situation that you found yourself in. That higher spiritual self, the infinite self, had an overview of how this life would actually develop from the initial programming that you would receive as a child. This idea is quite radical compared to modern religious ideas, but it doesn't necessarily contradict them. It just says that the infinity inside you had a perception. In my life, I've confirmed it to myself, to a certain extent anyway. Because as you develop awareness and perception, you can see that people are not just mind or personality. They're not a set of tribal beliefs. They're not just a physical body. They are a feeling. I can watch people going up the street, and looking at the etheric, I can see the feeling. As I watch the feeling, I know a lot of things about them. If I was their higher self, which I'm not, but if I was, I could at least be able to tell them, from my own limited perception, hey, you have these tendencies, these possibilities. This will happen in the next 3 months, 12 months, 10 years possibly. But my perception is minuscule compared to the infinite perception inside of you. So if a human can train themselves quite simply to watch people's feelings and comprehend them, how much more or how much greater would that infinite power within you be able to see what tendencies lie ahead, what difficulties and what strengths? So I believe that you had a vision of what you were going to get into. And I believe also that your next point of power in understanding this I am God routine is to accept where you are. Because fighting against where you are, bemoaning your circumstances, crying over the fact that you're not as privileged as someone else, crying because you are privileged and therefore spoilt or something, being upset because you don't have all the physical strengths or knowledge that you need, is ridiculous. You have to relax and accept, remembering that almost everything is reversible. Everything can change. And what you can't change, you probably don't need to change. You can just go beyond worrying about it instead. So say to yourself, this infinity inside me, that part of me which is God, loves and respects this evolution. Loves and respects where he or she finds themselves and their circumstances. Now, the circumstances of your life right now might suck. They might be absolutely grim. But in sitting down and not fighting, not resisting, not creating negative energy, negative feelings, negative emotions, you begin an instantaneous healing process. So, if you're surrounded by a bunch of incredibly negative or incredibly grim people, called relatives or mere friends or workmates, rather than fighting that ugliness, rather than fighting your misfortune, rather than being aggravated by the circumstances, love them. Love the circumstance. Look at these people, look at the job, look at your circumstances, look at your family, your tribe, your home, and say, thank you, God, for sending me these teachers. These are my teachers. They're driving me crackers. And what they're teaching me is to not react. What they're teaching me is to transmute negative energy into positive energy. To transmute hatred into at least neutral energy. Or if possible, love. These are my teachers. Thank you, God, for sending me teachers. Thank you for allowing me to be here on the earth plane. What an incredible experience. Isn't it fantastic that free of charge, I'm surrounded by 55 assholes that are going to teach me a lot about myself? So if you want to reach that infinity within you, you have to move away from the more rigid definitions of the ego. And let's face it, the ego is very self-indulgent, isn't it? It wants everything to be perfect. It wants to be recognized. It wants it easy. It wants it safe. It wants it cozy. It wants to be paid more than it's actually worth. It wants a lot of stuff that isn't reasonable. And you're going to have to walk away from that, and suddenly you're moving from the definitions and the unreasonable agony of the ego to at least a neutral position, saying, this is neither good nor bad. These people are driving me crazy, and that's neither good nor bad. These conditions seem uncomfortable to the ego, but in effect they're neither good nor bad. They just are. Even if the conditions from the ego's definition are grim, from the infinite definition, it's all part of your learning experience. It's part of your challenge. It's part of being here. So, I am God says, I'm eternal. I'm beyond the definitions of the ego, beyond death. So therefore, I'm also beyond fear. Fear is a manifestation of the ego. Negative energy is only a contradiction of the ego's opinion, remember. I'm going to be talking more about that later. So the first point that we have here is to internalize God. So if you're driving along in your car right now, and you have a concept of God that's outside of yourself, mentally bring God home. Bring God back inside your heart, even though you can't necessarily feel the infinity within you. At least imagine it there. Visualize it there. That doesn't transcend anybody's beliefs. You can still be, for example, a Christian and still believe in Jesus and feel Jesus inside of you rather than Jesus outside of you. If you have a concept of God outside of you, it disempowers you. Because what you're saying is, I do not have a command of my destiny. You're saying that you can't put out positive energy, a different reality, and make a difference and create a change. You can't get action-oriented, and you can't believe in prosperity and get more money. So with the God force within, you can power your consciousness to get you the things that you want. Naturally, the first point of spiritual maturity is accepting where you are, who you are, what you are. And the second part is knowing that you create your destiny. Okay, a part of your destiny was already pre-written when you got here. In your genetic code, in your tribal heritage, in the things that you learned. But most of it can be changed, adapted, modified for the better. So by internalizing the God force, you can begin to comprehend that the God force within you can be expressed outwardly, can be directed into your life to change it. So you have a power. It isn't someplace else. It isn't up on a podium somewhere, and you're this little person down here that has absolutely no power, no volition, no ability. The God force must come inside of you. And once you accept infinity as an idea, then your power begins to grow. You are the God force within. Say that to yourself as an affirmation, 3, 5, 7 times a day. I am the God force within. I can't necessarily feel it, but I'm imagining it in the meantime. The second step of the 33 steps is expanding your inner awareness. You have an awareness that comes from the 5 senses. And you have an awareness that comes from logic, your intellectual knowledge, and the awareness that comes from your experiences in this lifetime. But beyond that awareness is an inner awareness, an extra sensory perception. Let me tell you how it works. Once you've internalized the God force, once you accept that you are a part of an infinite energy that is inside all things, then you're connected to all things. Think of it like this. External reality seems outside of you, but that is an illusion created by a limited point of view. A trans-dimensional being watching the earth plane, watching people's thought forms, and feeling the earth would see the earth as one molecule of matter, thought, and feeling. It would see all of our evolution inside the one molecule. From beyond the earth plane, there would be no internal and external. There'd only be the one energy, all of it internal. So you're connected to all things, seen and unseen, here and not here. Strange, huh? Everything expresses, to a lesser or greater extent, the God force. The machine playing this lesson has some part of God force in it, because there's God force in the molecules. That is not as much God force as in something that's alive, like a worm, and a worm has less God force than a bird, because the bird is more complicated, and you are more God force than an animal. And some humans have a greater amount of God force than you and I have. There are levels, but you are connected. You are the worm. You are the bird. You are the machine. You are the car. You are the air that we breathe. Once you understand that, and once you understand that everything is alive and emits a feeling, then you can understand that you are a feeling as well. You are a thumbprint of energy that is the collective emotion you've developed in this lifetime. You're not so much what you think. You are what you feel. Those philosophies that say, think and grow rich, are not necessarily wrong, but they don't quite go all the way. You have to feel and grow rich. You're a feeling, and everything else is a feeling. So bit by bit, you can begin to place your awareness into things to discover how they feel. How does a seagull feel as it flies? How does this tree feel? How does this situation at work feel? How does this business proposal that the guy in the bar's just offered you feel? Is it crooked? Is it safe? Is it legal? Is it comfortable? How do things feel? In understanding that, you expand. Going on from understanding that you're feeling and understanding that you are the God force within, you have to accept that you can direct that God force. What that means is, whatever you concentrate upon is what will eventually manifest in your life. So if you believe in disease, you will imbalance your emotion and hasten the disease within you. If you constantly say, this job is a pain in the arse, the infinite energy within you takes it literally and you get hemorrhoids. If you say, I believe in lack, then opportunities miss you. Money falls from your wallet. Somebody steals your car. Ernest Holmes said, where your mind goes, energy flows. And old Ernest was right. We know that. Whatever you concentrate upon empowers you. So if you've been concentrating on negative or adverse things, if you've been concentrating on being overwhelmed, if you've been concentrating on difficulties and dysfunctions, you can be sure that they will be in your hall of fame, so to speak. Here's a statue to dysfunction. Here's another statue to frustration. Here's a statue that honors struggle. Let's bow down to the god of struggle and give that 15 minutes of your reality. As you decide to change, you're going to discipline your mind. How you're going to discipline your mind is you're going to police your dialogue and cut out depreciating statements that destroy your energy and make you sick. If someone asks you how you feel, don't answer, horrible, grim, life's a nightmare. Answer, fantastic. It doesn't matter if your life isn't fantastic. That's only the ego's point of view anyway. The spiritual reality that is your life is fantastic, and it's a very great privilege to be here. Next, you're going to gradually, over time, stop accepting things that destroy life force and affirm negativity. You're going to stop accepting things that destroy your balance and affirm weakness. So at first, your mind will be very strong. You will say, I believe, and the mind says, no, we don't. You will say, I feel good, and the mind says, no, I don't. You say, I think it's going to work, and the mind says, no, it won't. That's the beauty of this battle, of this journey. And you can push against the mind, not wrestling with it so much, just quietly disempowering its negative influence. So when it comes up with a negative thought, you can replace that negative thought, saying quietly to yourself, I don't accept that negative energy. I don't accept that fear. I am love. I am positivity. Everything flows through me. Everything comes to me for my highest good. And so you start to replace inside the mind the energy that has possibly created so much destruction in your life. An important thing to remember as you become more aware is that daily life, the circumstances of life, are actually external symbols of the inner you. So when you're walking down the street and something strange happens, you stop and watch. Let's say a black cat hops across your foot and does a somersault and crosses the road and pees up against the pub wall. Ask yourself, what does this mean? The fact that you are coincidentally there at that particular moment to witness the cat's antics means the symbol is yours. It's the external world talking to you. It is showing you things about yourself. So by internalizing the God force and by understanding that you have to quieten the mind, you begin to see how the universe is trying to take you by the hand and lead you on. The external-internal dialogue comes from serenity. It comes from silence. From the ancient legend of Camelot, we know that Arthur took the sword, Excalibur, from the Lady of the Lake. That Excalibur is power. It is silent power. It's not the ego's power, it's a silent power, and it came from the placid lake, meaning that the power comes from the serenity of your emotions. You don't have to be perfect to be serene. Tell yourself that 7 to 10 times daily. I am serene and balanced, whether life is perfect or not. You see, we're trying to get you to stop struggling against yourself. As you accept this gift of serenity, then bit by bit your emotions calm down. As your emotions calm down, the power comes up. It's not an egotistical power that you can wield to maneuver people. It's a silent power. It's a power that you will internalize. It's a power that you will use to heal your body. It is a power that you will use that will show you an evolution, a transcendence that is not normally available to people. But you have to learn to guard the power, to guard your energy and guard against the ego trashing it. It's a paradox of the ego that on one hand, it's babbling away, trying to build itself up, trying to generate gratifying experiences, trying to maintain its importance, and then in the same breath, it generates negativity to trash itself. Only the ego would believe that in moaning and groaning, things might get better. Essentially, it's calling for its mother to help it. I'll cry, I'll moan, I'll demonstrate the injustice of it all. Save me. Help me. If I bitch a lot, will you give me something for nothing? Will you commiserate? What you're going to do from here on out is you're going to discipline your mind. When you find yourself buying the negative emotion, getting out of control, you're going to stop and mentally change the program. Remember, don't buy the emotion, buy the solution. Expanding your awareness comes from understanding everything is feeling and asking yourself constantly, how does this feel? It's like a muscle that perhaps you haven't used for years. But as you begin to ask, it will show you. Do this. In a silent moment, ask that infinity within you to show you something in the next 24 hours that you've never seen before. A perception, perhaps. An intuition. A different way of looking at things that you've looked at 100 times before. Then watch carefully, and something unusual will pop up, and you'll see that the external and internal universe is talking to you, that it loves you in its detached way. Let's go to the next session. I want to talk to you about courage and the spiritual heroism of your life.